Could Willow be coming to WWE in the near future or at some time in the next 12 months or so? Well, Jeff Hardy has been speaking about the possibility of his alter ego appearing inside the WWE universe for the first time. Jeff Hardy recently spoke to BT Sports and mentioned that before he retires, he wants to introduce his Willow character to the WWE universe. Now, before we get into what he actually said to BT Sport, I think it's quite important to talk about him mentioning retirement there, because I think Jeff Hardy retiring completely from professional wrestling and retiring from WWE are two different things. Jeff Hardy still has quite a way to go on his current WWE contract, which we'll get into in a second. But when he finishes this contract, it's almost an open secret at this point, really, isn't it, that when he finishes this current WWE contract, he isn't going to extend it, I don't think. He's been pretty open about that, or at least implied it in several interviews, that once this contract is done with WWE, he's done. He just can't keep up with that schedule of WWE anymore, should they go back to a live event schedule of competing 5 times a week. At the moment, this kind of schedule that he's currently on in WWE is a lot easier for Jeff Hardy, because it's essentially the same schedule that he would have been on in Impact Wrestling. It's essentially the same schedule that he would be on if he were to go to AEW. At the moment, WWE superstars, they're wrestling once, maybe twice a week if there's a pay-per-view. That's it. There are no live events. They're only doing the live television tapings in the week, which is either Monday, Friday, or on a Sunday if there's a pay-per-view. So if this schedule stays the same by the time that Jeff Hardy's contract expires with WWE, which is quite a while, then perhaps he could extend it. But at this point, I think that when his contract expires with WWE, that's Jeff Hardy done with the company. I don't think it's him done with professional wrestling. I think Jeff Hardy still has a bit to give. Obviously, his body is pretty broken, if you pardon the pun there, because of all the crazy and high-risk moves that he's done throughout his career and all of the bumps he's taken. But I still think he has a bit of a way to go before he decides to call it a day. And I certainly could see him going to an AEW, or heck, even back to Impact Wrestling, who knows. So I don't think he's going to retire from professional wrestling when he retires from WWE. But going back to Willow, Jeff Hardy had spoken to BT Sport recently and discussed bringing Willow to WWE. Now, of course, Jeff Hardy first introduced this alter ego during his time in TNA, and that's not necessarily completely true. He had done it slightly prior to then in other companies, but it was very well accepted in TNA and Impact Wrestling. The vignettes that he did during the time before they actually brought the character in ring were very, very well received, because they were so off the wall. I mean, try and get in the mind of Jeff Hardy, right? It's completely out there. It was very off the wall, very different. It was Wyatt family-esque, I would say, and Bray Wyatt-esque at the time. That's what it got compared to quite a lot when he first brought it to Impact Wrestling in, I want to say 2013 or 2015. It was around that period of time, 2014 rather. 2013, 2014, I think it was around then. The first comparison was, this feels very much like the Wyatt family vignettes, because it was around that same time that Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family made their debut on the main roster. But it was very well received because it was so different, it was so unique, and it was a completely different side to Jeff Hardy that we'd ever seen. Now, a couple of times after that, he went back to his usual Jeff Hardy persona in Impact Wrestling, but they did try and bring it back a couple of times. However, it was for very infrequent appearances. It didn't stay around long enough to get much out of it. But Jeff Hardy, when he said this quote to BT Sport, and I'll read it out to you, he said, quote, "Years ago, I used to be Jeff Hardy, and then I'd be this guy Willow. Willow was kind of my go-to wrestling persona. That's another dream of mine before I'm done. I want to bring Willow into the WWE universe and see what could happen. I just have a strange feeling that something crazy cool would happen between Willow and the Fiend," end quote. Now, as I mentioned, Willow is actually short for Will-O-the-Wisp, and it's kind of, this whole Willow and Wisp and all of that sort of stuff is kind of intrinsic to Jeff Hardy. On his moveset, of course, he has the Whisper in the Wind, and it's meant to be a homage to Will-O-the-Wisp. And Will-O-the-Wisp was a character that Jeff Hardy actually has been using prior to even joining WWE. He used it in 1995, and it was, again, an infrequent persona that he used to do in those videos with Matt Hardy, right? And when they had there was an Omega Wrestling Federation. So he used the character in there. I believe he actually did it when he left WWE originally, which was what, 2003 or 2002? I think it's 2003. When he left WWE, he did Will-O-the-Wisp, I believe, for like one shot in Ring of Honor. And if I recall correctly, he got booed out of the building. They were not having Jeff Hardy being Will-O-the-Wisp, which is funny because, you know, fast forward however many years later, he actually did return to Ring of Honor. He didn't do the Will-O-the-Wisp character, but he was part of the Broken Hardys, and they ate that up. Maybe you can say that a lot of things about Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, but you've got to call them visionaries, in my opinion. This off-the-wall crazy characters that they've done so far back, I mean, 1995 is nearly 25 years ago now, and it's just as popular, or if anything, more popular today than it ever was then. So ahead of its time, really, if you want to give Jeff Hardy the credit for that one. But as I mentioned, Jeff Hardy also became Willow on Impact Wrestling for a few months in 2013, 2014, and it eventually became one of the characters also in the Broken universe. So, of course, you had Broken Matt Hardy, you had Brother Nero, but then they would also factor in Willow several times during that whole Broken universe run in Impact Wrestling. So there's legs to it. There's obviously a depth to that character, and I think Willow versus The Fiend in WWE, that could be great. That really could be great. That could be money. The characters of Willow and The Fiend, there's similarities to them, but realistically, they're not really similar at all. The similarity is purely aesthetic. The Fiend is a very, very dark character. He's the alter ego of this version of Bray Wyatt, the Firefly Funhouse version of Bray, but it's this very dark, the deepest, darkest corner of your mind kind of deal. The sort of real dark alter ego of Bray Wyatt, where Willow is an alter ego of Jeff Hardy, but I wouldn't consider him dark. I would consider him just different and unique, and he does have a bit of a scary image with the mask that he wears, but I wouldn't say it's as dark as The Fiend, so I wouldn't say they're similar, aesthetically maybe, but in terms of the character and the storylines that they've been involved in, I wouldn't say they're similar in that sense. However, I think given the elements and the potential of a match between Willow and The Fiend and a storyline between Willow and The Fiend, the best way to get something out of this feud would be in a cinematic match. It would have to be, really. Those two characters are so unique and so different that if anything, your run-of-the-mill standard wrestling match inside the squared circle, it wouldn't actually be enough. I'm not sure it would be worthy of that feud, really. I think it has to be a cinematic match. The characters are so out of this world, so supernatural, so not normal, that I think you have to present it in a cinematic fashion. And with the minds of The Fiend and with the minds of Jeff Hardy, when they're completely entrenched in these unique and different characters that allow them to do crazy stuff. Because, of course, if you're just Jeff Hardy and Bray Wyatt, you're almost limited to what you can do. Because these two guys don't have supernatural powers. These two guys aren't insane, kind of deal, you know. Whereas Willow and The Fiend, you open the door for so many possibilities there. You can kind of do anything you want, and then especially in a cinematic fashion, you can get really weird. And I mean really weird. And you can see in the Broken Universe when Matt Hardy did it, the weirder it got, almost the better it got. And I think that would be what would work with Willow and The Fiend in WWE. So I do think it would work. I think something you do have to consider here is that The Fiend at this point and Bray Wyatt, he's a babyface on SmackDown. It might not be completely apparent, but that whole feud with Braun Strowman, it turned Bray Wyatt into a babyface. And with Roman Reigns recently turning heel and becoming the Universal Champion, he's a heel as well. Braun Strowman's a heel too. So The Fiend, whenever he returns, is a babyface. And I mentioned before that The Fiend being a babyface, to me, doesn't change his character at all. It's the same way that when The Undertaker is a babyface or The Undertaker is a heel. The only thing that really changes when The Fiend becomes a babyface is his opponents. It's just a different pool of opponents that he'll face off with. So Jeff Hardy, of course, is the ultimate babyface in WWE. The only time he's actually been a heel was in Impact Wrestling, and I actually enjoyed that heel run quite a lot. Looking back on it, maybe was it the right thing to do? I don't know. Jeff Hardy was in a very difficult place in his life at that time, but I actually thought it was interesting just to see Jeff Hardy do something different. Support for WrestleNews 365 is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Now, Manscaped, for all of my UK fans out there, Manscaped just launched in the UK. Over here in the United Kingdom, we have gone for years and years and years without using the right tools for the job. But now you can be one of the first men in England to experience their life-changing product. But it's not just limited to all of the great fans over here in the UK. This offer goes worldwide, so all of my friends over in America and around the world that are listening to this offer still does apply for you. You can still use our code. But I've got to tell you a quick story first. Now, there have been so many times, right? I'm a guy. You gotta groom down there, fellas, right? That's the most important thing. You gotta keep yourself trimmed. You gotta keep yourself proper. And a lot of the time, I've been guilty of this, of using the wrong tools for the job. I've had incidences, I'm not afraid to say it, where things have been nicked, snagged, or in fact cut down there because I wasn't being careful enough and using the right equipment. Now that just shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. You don't want to be worrying about cutting yourself down there. Do you know how painful that is? I can tell you, it hurts quite a lot. And I wish and hope to God it never happens to me again, and it won't happen to me ever again because I'm using Manscaped products. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team has perfected the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created. Big statement, but it's absolutely true. They have just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0 in the UK. It's also available around the world as well. Their third generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents. So those cuts and snags that I was telling you about before are a thing of the past. And let me tell you, when I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes so you can get a longer, perfect shave. And not only that, you don't want to be cutting yourself and trimming yourself all over the bathroom, getting hair all over the place. That's just disgusting. The lawnmower has a waterproof technology that allows you to groom in the shower, so no more mess. And one of the coolest features, one of my favorite features about the lawnmower is the LED light which illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trimming experience. So you can shave longer, you can shave more precisely, and you can shave in the shower. What more did I need to tell you? They've also upgraded to a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology, and let's not forget about the charging stand. You can show off your mower loud and proud because this intelligently designed stand is a convenient charging dock powered by USB. So, if you are listening to me speak right now, I want you to experience it firsthand for yourself. Let's get that bush to tush clean, and you can get 20% off and free shipping. Yeah, you heard me right there. 20% off and free shipping. All you have to do is use the code 365wrestle at manscaped.com. Make your testies their besties. That's 20% off and free shipping. Not only are you getting 20% off, you're getting free shipping as well with the code 365wrestle at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code 365wrestle. Your balls will thank you. But I just can't see him becoming a heel in WWE. Now, that's not to say that this match can't happen because one's not a babyface, because they're both babyfaces, and one's not a heel. I think it absolutely can, but it's something to consider there. Reigns versus Bray Wyatt as well looks to be like the feud for the future on SmackDown, so I don't think this Willow versus the Fiend thing is going to be happening anytime soon, especially on SmackDown or in WWE. I think that's something to also point out here. Willow versus the Fiend isn't going to happen this year. It isn't, and maybe not even early next year as well. It's going to take some time. They're both very busy at the moment. Like I said, Bray Wyatt will be feuding with Roman Reigns soon after Clash of Champions. Jeff Hardy is entrenched in this Intercontinental Championship feud with Sami Zayn and AJ Styles, so they're both busy at the moment. Now, speaking of Jeff Hardy, I think it's also to point out that there certainly was a shot at AEW this week on SmackDown, regardless of what people say. There was absolutely a shot at AEW this week on SmackDown. After Jeff Hardy's match with AJ Styles, that Sami Zayn interfered in, Jeff Hardy's walking to the back and suddenly he passes out. And everyone's like, what? Why is Jeff Hardy passing out? He didn't get attacked super, super bad by Sami Zayn or anyone like that, but he passed out. They come back from commercial and the interviewer basically says, Jeff Hardy, he passed out, but he didn't lose consciousness. He was just dehydrated. He seems fine and is happy to continue and all that kind of stuff. There is no way that wasn't a shot at the Matt Hardy AEW situation from All Out. There's just no way. There is no way. It's the other Hardy brother, for one, and it comes straight after the Matt Hardy deal at All Out where he was knocked out, but they said he didn't have a concussion, etc. His wife says he does have a concussion. He's recovering, so Why would he be out of the ring? Why wouldn't he be allowed to drive if he didn't have a concussion? All of that sort of stuff. I don't want to drag that back up because it got me angry before, because I think it's BS. But it absolutely was a shot. I don't care what WWE says. And it's interesting that they took that shot, considering if you ask anyone in WWE, remember, we don't pay attention to AEW. AEW, they're not even competition. AEW? What's AEW? I've never heard of them before. No, we don't know who AEW is. Come on. Do me a favour. But going back to Willow versus The Fiend, I think this would be a lot of fun. And I do think it's something that WWE will explore. I don't know if it's necessarily something that they'll do, but it's certainly something that Jeff Hardy and I think Bray Wyatt would pitch and would want to do. Jeff Hardy at this point has actually quite a lot of time left on his contract. He has about 20 months left on his deal. Now, what's interesting here is, of course, Matt Hardy's contract expired in March of 2020, which was the original length of Jeff Hardy's deal, because Matt and Jeff signed at the same time with WWE, made their return to the company at WrestleMania 33 in March of 2017. Both signed 3-year deals, so if Jeff Hardy's original contract was meant to expire at the same time as Matt's, but during this WWE run, Jeff Hardy, he's had some problems. He's had a lot of injuries. He's had surgery on his shoulder and his knee. And then, of course, you have to factor in his personal issues, going to rehab, multiple arrests. So WWE, like they do now with these contracts, if you're on the shelf, they can add time onto your contract. That's something that they've added on to WWE contracts in the last few years. I would say going back, I would actually say not last few years, maybe at the least the last 5-6 years they've started to do this. So Jeff Hardy, with all of this time that he was off, they've added on about 20 months. So Jeff Hardy's contract is expiring at the very, very least at the end of 2021, maybe even longer. So that does give WWE opportunity for a lot of time to do this Fiend versus Willow feud. There's lots of time here, so there's no need to rush it. And I don't think they will. I think, like I said, if we see The Fiend versus Willow, it'll be in 2021, not early in the year, maybe later on in the year. But I do think it will happen in WWE. Now, they actually teased that potentially something like this could happen in that Ultimate Deletion match between Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy in 2018 on Raw. At the end of that match, Jeff Hardy made a cameo as Brother Nero, got in the face of Bray Wyatt, and then Matt Hardy threw Bray Wyatt into the Lake of Reincarnation. That's the closest we've got to anything like that. That wasn't even Willow, that was Brother Nero, and that's probably the closest we've got to a Bray Wyatt versus Jeff Hardy feud. Now, talking about Willow, I must say this, because I think if I don't talk about this, I'm probably being a bit disingenuous. I was never the biggest fan of Willow in Impact Wrestling, which might seem a bit strange. I called it critically applauded there because it was, and I was part of that group. I really, really enjoyed the Willow vignettes. I really did. I thought the Willow vignettes were great. The issue I had with Willow is that for me, once you had those vignettes done, once the entrance was done, once you got into the ring, it was Jeff Hardy wearing a mask. It was very obviously Jeff Hardy wearing a mask. He didn't really change his ring attire that much. It was a mask, but it was a mask and kind of a shoulders deal. But apart from that, it was still Jeff Hardy without a shirt on and his cargo pants, whatever they are. It just felt like an in-ring Jeff Hardy with a mask on. It was still very Jeff Hardy, and I thought it looked odd. I think that that's something that they would need to change. What for me makes The Fiend so great is that sometimes when he's wearing that mask and he's got the contact lenses on and the face paint and the ring attire, sometimes you can't even recognize that it's Bray Wyatt. Sometimes you look into that mask and, like I said, with the contacts on, you just sort of go, it looks nothing like Bray Wyatt. And obviously he's got the tattoos and the hair and it is Bray Wyatt, but he does such a great job in making that feel like just a different person to his Firefly Funhouse character, to the point where it's not even almost recognizable that it's him. The attire, the personality, the look, the presentation, the way he even works a match is different to how he would work a match if he's just normal Bray Wyatt. All of it. It's such a departure from the usual Bray Wyatt. That's what I think also makes The Fiend so great. So I think if Jeff Hardy does bring Willow back and brings it into WWE, he needs to look at that. He needs to look at The Fiend and go, right, I need to change a lot about it. The presentation, the ring attire, all of it needs to be so far removed from what Jeff Hardy usually is. Let's make Willow just a complete different person. And I think WWE would look to do that. WWE, if they brought Willow in, would look to change Willow. For good or worse, that's what they do. Look at history, look at their track records. WWE doesn't allow to have the exact gimmick of something outside of WWE and bring it right in. They have to change it. They have to change it. Vince McMahon hates outside creations. So WWE wouldn't allow to have the exact Willow in WWE. Vince McMahon, whenever an outside gimmick comes in, they have to be made in his own image. There has to be tweaks to it. And that's not just outside WWE. Just look at NXT. At this point, NXT is barely, in my opinion, underneath the WWE umbrella. Because an NXT superstar, when they come up to Raw and SmackDown, it's almost irrelevant what they've done in NXT, because when they come to Raw or SmackDown, their character is sometimes completely changed, or their look is changed, their music is changed, their gimmick is changed. So it's almost like an outside creation coming into WWE just from NXT, and NXT is technically a WWE property. So Willow, he's an outside creation from even outside WWE. They'll change him. They'll absolutely change him. Just look at Matt Hardy in WWE with the broken character. When they returned, Jeff and Matt, in 2017, what everyone was waiting for was broken Matt Hardy in WWE. Now, obviously, at the time, there were legal issues between Matt Hardy and Impact Wrestling, whether or not he could use the character. That eventually was settled, and Matt could bring the character to WWE. And everyone was excited. Matt Hardy, people forget, I think, at this point. In 2016, early 2017, Matt and Jeff Hardy were arguably two of the hottest people in professional wrestling outside of WWE. They'd completely reinvented themselves, especially Matt Hardy, and everyone wanted him. Everyone wanted him. The fandom online was obsessed. Social media was obsessed with the Broken Universe because it was brilliant. So when they signed with WWE, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredible. This is going to be the big Broken Universe comes to WWE. But again, Vince McMahon obviously had never seen the Broken Universe or Broken Matt Hardy, because he doesn't pay attention to anything outside of WWE, and that's not necessarily his fault. He just doesn't have the time, I don't think. But he took one look at Broken Matt Hardy and went, that's an outside creation. We've got to tweak it, make it more WWE. So he wasn't broken, he was woken. The character, while it was similar to the Broken Matt Hardy, it was different in certain circumstances. They actually had entrance music and not the piano music. And eventually it became, again, not so dark. It was overly comedic, and just, it was different. And if anything, looking back on it, the broken Matt Hardy character didn't work in WWE. And that was because I don't think Matt had the input that he thought he was going to. As is the case with WWE, they have to change outside creations, and that's what hurt Woken Matt Hardy in WWE. So if Willow comes in to WWE, which I do think they will do, I just think it'll be different, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. We'll have to wait and see. But it's certainly an interesting prospect. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on a potential Willow versus the Fiend feud in the future in WWE? Is it something you'd like to see? How would you book it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys on this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos before. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Over the weekend, we hit over 800 subscribers, so thank you very much for all that has subscribed. The next step, of course, is 900 on that run to 1,000 subscribers. We're nearly there, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.